Thank you so much. Thank you so much for doing this. I'm looking forward to it a lot. Oh. We seem to have lost Gonzalo again, unfortunately. I'm wondering if that's because he tried to send the PowerPoint or change the PowerPoint. Seems to have kicked him off the connection again. Sorry about this. He's here still, but just not showing for us. Oh, he's coming in now.
Yeah.
Hi. Hi.
Hi.
So
yeah,
you
can see now my.
Yeah, we can, but you dropped off the connection again for a bit.
Yeah, it's like I'm in and out. Like I don't know why. Could be my internet connection.
Should we start and try, Gonzalo? And if it's stable, fine. Otherwise, we might have to reschedule or something. But let's see if it can work out. Hopefully.
Perfect.
Okay.
Perfect.
Great.
I'm going to start. So because I have prepared like a presentation of 45-50 minutes, but I tend to speak a lot. So I'm trying to keep it in the time. My name is Gonzalo Hidalgo. I'm a PhD student at the University of Bristol in the School of Education. And I want to thank to Professor Corinne Squire and to the Association of Narrative Research and Practice for this opportunity to share my work, what I've been thinking about my thesis. And so thank you very much, Corinne. And my presentation today, the title is this, Giving a Good Education in Chile. And I want to explore the education quality through the narrative of parents, narrative of schooling and parenting. This are going to be the content.
Okay, so I think what happened was whenever Gonzalo changes slides, he loses his connection, unfortunately. So I'm going to ask him if he can send it to me, but I still haven't had those slides yet from him. Apologies for this. We'll re-establish a connection. We may ask him just to talk without the PowerPoint, I think, as well.
Oh.
Hi, Gonzalo.
Can you hear me?
We can, but
I think I'm gonna close my video. Maybe that is.
Yeah. Okay. I'm just wondering. It seems also to happen when you change the PowerPoint. I don't know if you were changing the PowerPoint.
Yeah. Let me try without video and with the PowerPoint.
Fine. Good idea.
And see if it works.
Yeah. Great.
You can see my screen.
We're good.
Yeah. So these are like the contents of my presentation today. I'm not going to stop, given that we have technical problems. I'm going to start my presentation. So what my project is about, I want to explore the giving a good, my research education as a social test. And the idea of social test I'm taking from this particular article, but there are other references there in the slide. The idea of social test is a challenge that the different families and the different individuals faced in a particular context, in a particular moment of history. And Araujo and Martuchelli here in this article, they describe 4 characteristics of this social test. The first one is that it's not separable from the narrative dimension. So a test is supposed to be it's supposed to be something that the people can give an account about how they are facing the different challenges, the different tasks of this test. The social test from this perspective, again, also is something that is compulsory. It's not something that is optional that you can try or not. It's something that some kind of individuals are obliged to face. And my argument is that this giving a good education is kind of compulsory for all the families. And also, as any test and any exam, it supposes an evaluation process. So there are many different ways in which to give or provide a good education, but there are some of them that are more appreciated than others. And the people, of course, don't have the same position to face this social test. And because of that, the results of the test are always open. So you can pass and you can approve in some ways this particular test, but you also can fail. So these are the ideas that are helping me to think about the giving a good education and explore it as the main object of my research. So my questions in simple are how the social test of giving a good education is constituted in the education policy. How do parents experience, live, or solve this test, and how they make sense of education quality? And I have a more particular question about how fathers take part in this giving a good education. And in the presentation today, I want to focus especially in this second question and how parents articulate some meanings and some practices about education quality. You are here, yeah? Because I just can see my presentation. So I want to tell you also about the context in which this research is being developed. And this is me, as you can see. And I started the PhD in September, October 2019, and full of dreams, but with some ideas about my project. And the main concept of my proposal was meaning of education quality, school choice, and social justice. They are the kind of things that I wanted to explore. But after a couple of weeks, after starting my PhD, this happened in Chile. And the Chilean timeline, in a way, became, it was always important, but became a concern of the everyday life, every moment in this process. A huge people uprising, what started as a student protest because of the increase in the price of the tube, of the public transport, became very quickly in a national scale. People are rising, millions of people in the street, very angry about the inequality of the country, the abusive relationship with some basic services that are mainly privatized, but also a huge distrust with the political and economic elite in Chile. But in order to understand this people are rising, and also the topic of my research, we need to go back a little bit in the recent history of Chile and goes to the dictatorship and how there was a neoliberal imposition during that period. And I'm not going to stop a lot on this, but it's this imposition of neoliberalism in Chile. It's been called in different ways: the Great Experiment, the Neoliberal Revolution, Chile as a laboratory of neoliberalism. But the fact is that, especially in education, the policymakers during the dictatorship had the very unusual opportunity to make almost whatever they wanted, like to work in clean slates, as Stephen Ball described it. And the change in the educational system was very quick. And after the dictatorship, we ended with a policy framework that was characterized by these particular things: a huge privatization of the educational system, the school choice as a right, recognized almost as a right of families, and protected in the constitution that was made during the dictatorship. The schools were allowed to have profit even when they were publicly funded. Voucher funding scheme in a national scale, and also, and this was after the dictatorship, but was allowed, the families were allowed to top up the voucher, so that was called chair funding. And the schools received, some schools received funding from the state and from the parents. During the dictatorship as well, they developed a system of a standardized test, and it's called SIMSE, and it has like it is like a census. It's applied to every children in one level every year, and the schools were also allowed to select the student, and this was a selection that could be academic in some very emblematic and academic-driven schools. Also public schools, but also that selection could be because of cultural, religious, and social characteristic of the families. Many researchers in Chile have argued that this characteristic of this policy framework is being one of the main reasons why, because Chile is one of the countries with the highest socioeconomic segregation in the OECD. However, the neoliberalization of the education in Chile was never without a critical discourse and without resistance. And there are many different actors that are being challenging these policies and this way to conceive the education. And one of them were the student, and there was huge social movement and student movement in 2006 and 2011 that explicitly challenged the marketization of the education, and that promoted a series of some changes in the way in which the education was working. And one of them was the Inclusion Act in 2015, which in summary ended with profit, with the chair funding, and this is going to be gradually implemented, but it's going to be the 90% of the school are going to be free when the state can replace the top up that was paid by parents. And they also ended with the student selection, with some exceptions, but in general, they implemented a platform, an online platform, in order to apply for the schools. And so going back to the People Are Rising, and I'm sharing this because some of the content that were in the street, in the walls, in some newspapers, was this idea that the neoliberalism was born and will die in Chile. And I show you this because of the kind of expectation that some groups in the country had related with this process of changes. I'm including myself there. So in this context, I was trying to define my research question, and I even I make the question myself, like, well, is quality or this kind of discussion really what I want to do? Maybe I can be concerned about this new process. So it was a moment of many, many questions. I want to very quickly trying to share with you how this history follow, in order that you can see what is been happening during the development of in the country during the development of my research. After weeks of social unrest in the country, the political forces in the parliament made an agreement, and they call for a referendum in order to ask the people if they want or not to change the constitution that was with a lot of changes after, but that the core of the constitution was made during the dictatorship. And the 80% of the population of the people voted for a new constitution. So then it was there was a constitutional commission, a constitutional convention, where the people that was elected there were mainly people from the progressive forces, many different parties and movements, but the majority of them really wanted change, a profound change in the way in which the country was working. This constitutional commission, in the middle, there was a presidential election, and it was important because all this process was present in my interviews with the people. The people asked me, some of them, like, who is your candidate? Who are you gonna vote for? So that was part of the discussion. In the presidential election was won by the left-wing candidate, which was actually one of the leaders of one of the social movement in 2011. But in the second round, the other candidate was from the far right. So there was like very different projects in the debate and in the dispute in that election. After 1 year of the work in the Constitutional Commission, they presented a new constitution, a new text to the country, and a very progressive text with protection of the environment, recognition of the indigenous nations, paritary democracy with equal participation of women and men, and the recognition on a series of different rights. However, the 62% of the population voted against this new constitution. And now we are in the situation in which tomorrow is going to start a new constitutional commission. But in this time, the people that was elected with new rules and new composition, but the people that was elected is mainly from the conservative parties, and the main political force is the far right. So that was like the process during the last 3 or 4 years that is being the political discussion of Chile in a very quick description. So of course it's much more complex than this, but my research is being developed in this process, and in particular during the first week of the first Constitutional Commission. But the other thing that happened not just in Chile, but everywhere during this year was COVID-19. And this, of course, crossed my research, and especially my methodology, but also the parents had another access to the school, because when I was doing my research and my interviews, the schools were closed. So they had a new experience about the relationship with the school. This is just a reminder about what was about my research. So I'm gonna go forward. My theoretical framework, I just want to share some of the concepts that are helping me to think about this, giving a good education. And I'm using theory that in general are described and are called and named as post-structural. And I use the idea of discourse from the Laclau and Moff's theory of discourse, that they understand discourse as an articulatory practices that establish different relationship within different elements. And these articulations are essentially political, because when they articulate some element, they leave other element exclude from this articulation. So there are always a dispute there. And this is important, this structured totality is always incomplete, open to contingency, concertation, and antagonism. And I'm also using the idea of hegemony to account for when these articulations are partially fixed and their meaning became common sense in a way. I'm using the idea of governmentality as a category of analysis in order to interrogate the rationality of government, and which this very classical definition of the conduct, and the interrogation of these multiple practices and technologies of government in the context of neoliberalism, focusing especially in the one that are related with the self-regulation and the self-management as the main element of the conduct of conduct. And also, I'm trying to understand the concept of education quality as a floating and empty signifier, and floating because it can be articulated by different discourses, so the meaning can change, but this floatiness is explained as a condition of this floating character is because of its emptiness in a way. And what I want to argue, and I can discuss this in the conclusion, is that in general in the literature, education quality is being understood as a result of a dispositive of governmentality, for example, the test, the accreditation, the assessment. And so what is understood as quality is as a result of the other technologies. I would like to argue that quality itself is part of the governmentality dispositive. Like, this is one of the points. And narrative in this context, how I understand narrative, I understand narrative as a mean in which individuals articulate meaning and make sense of their experience, but they are also always products of the operation of discourse, powers, and history. And following the Laclau and Moff's theory, the narratives, as any other entity, are articulations that are always incomplete and open to contingency. And in that openness there is possibility for the emergence of resistance and counter discourses. So I want to understand narrative as a bridge, maybe between discourse and experience, or as an intermediate space where discourse and experience can relate, can have some kind of interaction. So that is the way in which I approach the idea of narrative. And there is this quote from Corinne with the Sin and Fathy that really makes sense for me, like the narrative as socially constructed by the interplay between interpersonal, social, and cultural relationships, rather than analyzing them as a representation of reality or representation of a single meaning. We are okay. There are someone there, because I don't have any feedback, any faces.
I think we're all here.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Sorry.
Sorry.
I just don't want to lose you, Gonzalo. So that's why I'm not.
Yeah. No, it's perfect. But I just wanted to have some feedback if there was someone there. My research design and my methodology, I'm doing, what are my methods? I'm doing some policy and text analysis, and I choose two particular legislations in Chile, the Inclusion Act and the Quality Assurance Act, but I'm also interrogating the parliamentary discussion, not in order to interrogate the policy-making process, but in order to trace some metaphors and some narratives that can be disseminated through the political talks. I'm gonna try to share with you some of them, but I want to focus on this other part of my research, which is the interviews. I plan a number of interviews with families, and I made some first individual interviews, which were mainly narrative, like with very open questions about their experience of parenting, their experience of school choice, and their experience of schooling. And I did in each family one individual research with the mother and with the father separate, because I wanted to also see some differences between them. And I also plan an interview with the couple. And in the case of single mom, single dad, or when one of the members didn't want to participate, the couple interview became a second interview with the same person. So, and in this interview, I used some graphic material. I created a fictional school with results, with photos, with things, in order to encourage a discussion about quality and how, but mainly as an encouragement in order to discuss their ideas of quality and school choice. And the people took in very different ways this task of having this fictional school. And due to the pandemic, all my interviews were online, and I'm not gonna focus on the fact that the research was online, but if you have any question about it, we can discuss it after during the discussion. Just to show you, this is my fictional school. These are the exact way in which the quality office in the Ministry of Education showed the result of the schools. So this is the performance level. This is reading, math, reading, and these are other indicators of personal social development. And this was the fictional location of the school, etc. And these were some pictures that I took from the platform in which they need to apply for the schools. And these are schools that are located in other region in the country, and they are all different schools. It is totally fictional, but these are public pictures. My research is in one particular district in Santiago, which is La Florida. And I choose this district because it's very diverse and very representative in a way. This is the socioeconomic index of La Florida are not very different to the index of the entire city. But also because it has a huge local educational offer. It has more than 100 schools in the new admission system platform. And also La Florida is being described as a symbol of the Chilean new middle class, and also as a place where you can observe the education market with clarity because of this huge educational offer. But also I have a personal relationship with the territory. I did half of my school years in La Florida, so it was also familiar for me. Even though I never lived in La Florida, I used to live in San Joaquin, which is next to this district. But I know like the different places, and my friends live there, etc. And this is what I did. I 20 families participated in my study, and I did in total 47 interviews with 30 different people. All these families had children that attended state and subsidized private schools that were implementing the Inclusion Act in La Florida. Not all of them lived in La Florida, but all of them attended a school in La Florida. And the group is very diverse in terms of type of school, background, age, and socioeconomic level. The interrogation of differences between classes is not the focus of my study, but all of the families, or almost all of the family, belong to what Canales and others are called, have called the popular sectors, in order to make a distinction for the dominant sector that are composed by the elite and the very traditional middle class. And these popular sectors are very diverse, and you can find there the new middle class, the lower middle class, and lower classes. And I think the different families that are present in my study, they are very representative of these very different groups. And I'm telling this because what we understand, that what we call middle class in Chile is very different to this very privileged group that is called here in the UK or in the US. My analysis is mainly what is being described as a thematic narrative analysis with a focus on what is said mainly, the told rather than the telling. And I take each family as a case, and I start to interrogate it with some question about quality, about parenting, and about fatherhood, the different narrative, and I took some fragments in order to analyze each of these topics. Then, but always conserving each family as one case. Then I did some mapping in order to make some connection, especially to allow me a better access to the different connection and the different families. And what I'm going to present today is some commonalities in the articulation of meanings and practices that the families were describing. So I'm not going to present like the case of one particular family. I'm going to present some of the elements that were common in the account of the families. I'm not going to stop here because of the time, but these are some preliminary about the analysis, not many surprises. There is a huge emphasis in this being called learnification and the hegemony of education as something that is just related with learning outcomes and measurements. And even though the law and the act recognize the existence of other indicators of educational quality, they are always referred as the others. And actually, when you see some of the document, the justification for these others indicators of the educational quality just are important when they are based. The justification is based always in the contribution to the student learning. And I want to and also I want to share here just one of particular thing, because I'm also trying to interrogate some of these phantasmatic logics and these narratives and these stories and these fantasies that are disseminated in the discussion. And I've been recognizing two kinds of narrative related with parents and quality in the parliamentary discussion. One of them is this beatific narrative of no one knows better what is good for their children than their parents, and that is very present in the discussion. And the other side of the same story is this horrific narrative of if it's not the parent, it's going to be a bureaucrat, it's going to be the state, and there is the risk of indoctrination. That kind of element that I've been identifying but this is very preliminary, so I'm still working on this. But this is what I want to present actually to you today, how the people live this process of trying to give a good education. And I really like this quote because it summarizes very well what I was thinking at the beginning when I was planning my project. And Thomas, this father, say he was also a teacher. He said, "Quality is like God. It's a theme devoid of logic and means absolutely nothing. The word quality in education says absolutely nothing, and you are right. For example, when I'm at the school, the UTP is the person that is in charge of, is the chief or is in charge of the pedagogic decisions in the school. When the UTP talks to me about quality in education, he talks about 50 things, and sometimes they are even contradictory. I really like this comparison between quality and God, and the fact that he recognized the emptiness, but he attributed a very powerful concept as God. So it's still like very important in the process of signification. So how people live this process and what they relate with the idea of quality. First of all, the learning outcomes and the standardized test, even though it's very hegemonic in the policy and is almost the only focus of the test and the evaluation and the Office of Quality, this was it was present, of course, in the discussion, and the parents are concerned about elements related with learning. But I would say that it had like a secondary position in their talking about quality. And in part, it's because of there is a mistrust in particular with the test. And the test is called like this, SIMSE. This standard test, because it has more than 30 years, almost all these parents had the experience of taking the test. I also took the test, I remember. So they say like, well, no, we don't take it in account, because they had the experience of taking the test, and they could see some like little corruption and tricks that the schools made in order to have a good result, because the tests have consequences for them. So he was describing this experience of that he was a very good student, so he had very good grades. So they practically waiting for me with a cake on the SIMSE day, but their friends, the other children, were told to stay at home that day. So we saw that this was falsified for many reasons. So there was this feeling of mistrust. It was very present in the account of the parents, but also they are very aware about the market and the competition of the schools. So some of them, when we had the opportunity to discuss about this result in my fictional school, they told me like, yeah, but this, of course, the school is trying to look attractive. Is because they compete, they receive by the post mail some advertising of the school saying, well, we are better than this other school. So they understand that there are the rules of the market, and not always it was informed as a criticism. It was like they are very aware about how the competition works. But also their distance with the standard test and the SIMSE was also because they were worried about other things that are ignored because of the focus on the test. And this is very interesting, because it's one of the arguments that the people that is trying to change this focus on the test is trying to rise in order to change this policy. But also they were very worried about their children's well-being because of the pressure and because how anxious and nervous their children were when they had to take the test. So there is a distance in many of the families with the idea of this standard test and how this can give an account of what is really quality. And related with this last concern about the children's well-being is the second articulation that the parents made in their narratives, which is well-being, and probably is the most important thing that the parents described. And well-being for them is very related with the recognition of their children's individuality. And I have this quote from Ignacio, and this is interesting because Ignacio used his own experience as a student. At the beginning, when I was planning my interviews, I thought, well, they are going to describe their experience as parents. But very quickly, in the first interviews, I realized that the narratives were full of their experience as a student as well. So the narrative of schooling were not just the schooling of their children, were also stories about their own schooling. And Ignacio was telling me about his experience of going to a school, and he had ADHD. So for him, it was very challenging, and he was describing how difficult it was to concentrate in the school. And that is why he said, like, the need of a more personalized, as he said, a school with fewer students, the teacher that can be very attentive of the needs of each one student, and keep an eye in each one of them. So I think that is why it should be more personalized. So this is an element that the personalized education is an element that is always described. But also they are very concerned about, and they really expect something that is being described as childhood good, that is protect the experience of their children while they are children, and they're concerned about happiness, the joy that the student had to feel. They really expect an education that can be fun and motivating for the children. And I have this quote from Eva, and she was telling me about their experience looking for a school for the first time. And she told me, well, the school we found, which was smaller, personalized, fewer children, is like a family. And she was telling me this, that the people with that was very nice, and the cleaning assistant had this unique charisma, the teacher, everyone, and she ended like, well, and when she saw her daughter like came in happy, and to see her little face when she came out and she said, mom, I'm happy, that is the right school. So the well-being of their children was probably the most important thing when they started to talk about quality. And this well-being is always related with something that is being described, and I think every person use exactly the same words, this need for a good atmosphere in the school. And this is something that is being described in other research in Chile, but also in Spain and in France, like this idea of a good environment, a good atmosphere in the school is something that the parents are looking for. But in many ways, in many times, it's like an euphemism to describe a particular social composition, as I'm gonna describe later. But in my conversation with the families, in some point, many of them told me, Gonzalo, we have discussed, and it's very good, very interesting. We have discussed a lot about the school choice, about the teachers, what the school do. But in reality, a good education and education quality starts at home. And Teresa was very direct to say this, like, look, it's like an universal issue because of education to be of quality. Everything starts at home. Families are a fundamental pillar, regardless of how they are, what characteristic the family has. But I think the primary basis for education quality starts at home, start with the family. So in almost every conversation, in every interview, they moved the conversation from the school to what was happening inside the house. And they started to, I'm not going to enter in the details, but they started to describe some practices that can be described as a very intensive parenting, like being on top of every step, everything, and an experience that is lived like a very exhausting, especially for the mothers. And also a hyper responsabilization of everything, even when things that were not totally under their control. They feel very responsible because they choose that particular school, because they was their decisions. For example, one of the mothers was telling me that she believed that the reason why one of their children were less good in the school with the scores, and then it was because she talked to him less while she was pregnant. So this kind of the responsabilization is about an interrogation of any kind of practice of parenting. And this is very connected with a very strong narrative about the parental and childhood determinism. So what is going to happen, what the practices of the parents are understood as something that is going to determine an important part of the life of their children. So it's crucial. And also that they have like a particular moment in the life of their children in order to make a good job. And if you don't do it in that moment, you can have some problems. So this father Jose, he was telling me, like, if we cannot educate our children when they are young, it is impossible to educate them when they grow up. Yes, it happens. It's happened especially now with the problems that we have had in schools. When you go to complain, and they take the father of the person of the problem, and they call him, then you realize, oh yeah, I know why the children is like that. Why? Because he's just like his father is. So that is the basis. Education starts at home. That is how it is. So what happens within the house is also like a moral boundary with other fathers that are not as concerned, as attentive, and don't have this style of parenting that is recognized as the one that is good. And also there is like and this was a surprise because for me, because sounds at the beginning a little contradictory, but what the education that happens at home is described as a very, very, very important, and probably the most important thing, but it's described as very, very fragile. Any contact with someone outside this bubble, in a way, is risky. Is risking the project that they have, and they have different ways in order they describe this risk as being a parent. You don't want like your child to learn things that other kids already know, like trying to protect this project of parenting that they have from this other influence that and it seems to be very, very fragile, this construction. And this idea of good environment and this fragility of what happens at home is very related with the social composition as education quality, and this has been described in many researchers in many research in Chile. And as Juana described it, I always tell my children that the student makes the school, not the school make the student. And they start, when they are talking about quality, very quickly to talk about the quality of people. And it's not something that is, for some of them, it was easy, but for not for all of them, it was easy to talk about this. And they told me, well, it's difficult to talk about the people like this. And you can see like the hesitation here in this quote, like, well, the quality of the student, and they were looking for a school that were not so poblacional, even though we live in a población. Población is a concept that is used in Chile, in Santiago, mainly to describe some neighborhood that are characterized by, they are poorer maybe, but probably they are, the main characteristic is that they can be dangerous in some ways. I was trying to look for something better. And this also related with this I like this quote because it shows how the narrative can travel very, very quickly in the street, in the neighborhood. This is Camila is a Colombian mother, and she was describing her experience just some months before navigating for the first time in the Chilean education system, and how when she arrived, she was looking for a school for the first time in Chile, and how she was looking for some people recommendations. And a friend, a neighbor, told her like, look, this school is good. This school is not so good because there are many flighty people. And she said, well, I told her, but what is that? Because I didn't know the Chilean words. No, look, they are people who don't have a very good education. Flight is a concept that is very similar to the concept of chav here in the UK. It's a derogatory category, but is very frequently used in Chile and describe mainly young people that for probably a poor background, but specifically some kind of relationship with criminality or challenge to the law and the authority. It's more complex than that, but it's similar to what is called chav here in the UK. And the social composition is something very important in the assessment of quality in the description of parent. Is also related with the idea of money as equal as in a relationship very direct with quality, not just because it's a filter, and also because it shows some concern about the parents, and they are very explicit to say, well, when you pay, even if it's a few amount, it's because you really care about what is happening with your children. But also they relate money with quality because of the schools are going to have more resources for the educational process, but also because it gives them a possibility to complain and to demand some particular things. And this situation leave the state schools in a very uncomfortable position because they are for free and they are inclusive. So in general, in the description of their parents, the state schools are portrayed as in a relationship of opposition with quality. And this is the last one, the last thing that I want to present. In the context of this challenge of the way in which, in that very shifting political context, parents also, education quality was also a reminder of injustice and inequality. And this is mainly because the idea of quality is in general discussed from the premise of lack. So when we discuss about quality, is because we are discussing about a problem, about something that is lacking. And many of them told me like, well, we can discuss a lot about quality here in La Florida and Puente Alto as this father. But what is really of quality, if we really want to talk about quality, is what is happening in the other neighborhood, in the other district where the richer people live. So and the wealthy people in Santiago lives in the highest part of the city. So the reference of what is quality is what is happening up there was a very common sentence in the interviews. Like quality is in reality is what's happening in other place, a place where we don't have access. And facing this injustice and the feeling of injustice and inequality in general, when they were sharing their expectation about the possible changes in the country, they were mainly describing and demanding equality. And in general, they say, well, every school needs to be the same, and we need to what they are demanding, as this mother say, like everything is the same. There is equality for everyone, all the different type of the school. But however, no one, and this is something that I'm exploring, the demand of equality was not the same, or is not, they don't portray a system disaggregated. So this, in their ideal scenario, this was all the schools were going to be the same, but not necessarily the same school that these very privileged people attend. So they didn't portray that as something possible. So the segregation remains unproblematized in general. And I have some ideas to conclude, because I have, it's been longer than my plan. The first thing, that despite of the hegemonic character of quality as learning outcome in the policy, the meaning and practices articulated by parents go beyond academic performance, and education quality as a floating signifier, because of its contact with other discourses and everyday experience, show an unstable character. But this unstable character is not, it doesn't mean that it's a weak, or actually, I'm trying to argue that it is that emptiness and this unstable character that gives to education quality a very powerful mobilizing force, reading practices, conduct, and articulation of meanings. And this is one of my concerns, and something that I want to discuss as well now. This meaning and practices emphasize, that are articulated by parents, emphasize mainly individual aims of education. And so they are very excluded some collective aims in general, and good education conflated with good parenting makes that good education is portrayed as a very private responsibility. Education quality and social segregation are directly and indirectly related in the parent narratives. And this is what I think, like, the school face the risk of being conceived as a service for parents and devoid of collective aims of public education. For example, the consolidation of democracy and social cohesion. This already, I already told this. Education quality is also a remainder of social injustice. However, the normalized segregation in the educational system, because of that, it's difficult for parents to picture a desegregated system in their ideal scenarios. And I want to finish with this a little bit more positive, maybe, idea that probably the contested character of education quality can give some opportunities to challenge its meanings, and for example, to promoting diversity also as a quality. So thank you very much. I'm going to start my video now again.
Thank you so much, Gonzalo. Thank you. That's great. Thank you. We got I think I got a really good idea of this from having little context or anything, and just really interesting theoretically as well. Yeah, have we got some comments or questions that people want to ask? I know a couple of people had to leave, but yeah. Any thoughts? I don't know if some people, you might want to introduce yourselves also and say, if some people may be here because they have some similar work going on, some similar research experiences. That would be interesting, I guess, Gonzalo, to hear.
Yeah, and I'm very happy with any comment, any question, suggestion, experience. Maybe some of you are parents and are living this process. Or anything that I couldn't include in the presentation, I'm very willing to share my thought about it. Yeah, so.
Okay, Cassian is trying to get the mic on. Okay, it's always a problem. Cassian, it looks like it's working. Is it working? Oh.
Pablo has the.
I'm just waiting for Sylvia. Also, Sylvia, do you want to go? Because we're waiting for Cassian. So
Pablo,
Okay, Pablo,
was
yes,
first.
raised his hand first, yeah.
Pablo, sorry.
Hi everyone. This is Nico. Actually, it's from the Pablo's account. We are both PhD student here at UCL. I'm Chilean too, and I would like to ask Gonzalo if he could elaborate a little bit more about how you reach these 20 families. Because I have a very clear description about who these families are.
Yeah.
Right, but could you please tell a little bit more about your criteria to select these 20 families? How do you reach them? Like, how did you came across them? It was your personal relationships, like for instance, people you know, or it was entirely people you know because of the research? Maybe you can tell us a little bit more about that.
I can tell you my entire strategy of recruitment and the things that fail and how in the end I got some contacts. I don't have many relationships in La Florida when school, so with parents in general. So it was something that was I was worried about, how I'm gonna get access to people, and especially in the context of the pandemic from Bristol. Like, and at the beginning I started to, and I didn't want to, but I started to I thought like, well, maybe I can ask to some schools if they can share my leaflet in their social media, because the schools were closed. So they were having a lot of contact with the parents through social media in general. And I asked to many of them, even my school, and no one replies. No one school replies my request. And I can understand it was a very stressful time, so it was not the best moment to do this. So then I go full online, and I went to, someone told me, you need to go to Facebook groups and Twitter and some accounts from that particular place, from La Florida, and in order to get access to the people. And they are very active. And so I did that. I started with some Facebook group in La Florida, with Twitter, with, well, I had to learn how to hashtag things and tag people I didn't know, to be honest. And then I continue with like a snowball strategy. But in general, were people that I contacted, and I posted some leaflets in Facebook.
Yeah, I see. Thank you. Thank you. It is such an interesting project to hear. Thank you for your presentation.
Are you working on something similar? Either of you?
Kind of. I'm more into social linguistics. Here I'm studying also these courses about English language education in Chile, in secondary schools, in primary school, public also. But I'm more into the lived practices. Visiting school. I mean, I visited last year. Because of the pandemic, you know, the protocols eased last year and school went face-to-face. So yeah, I had the opportunity to visit and engage with some people, and I'm paying more attention to how these courses about English language education are reconstructed in situated spaces, in people live experiences. But I definitely can relate with this idea of quality of education as an empty label that people fill with meanings as they come across. For some people, it means a thing, for others another. It depends also of the circumstances, right? And as Gonzalo was saying about the personal stories, I mean, people have an idea of public education regarding their own experience in the system, right? Thank you, Gonzalo, for your presentation.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Silvia, you had a question.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I mean, thank you, Gonzalo, for your presentation. I enjoyed it very much. I think you have a very well-structured presentation, which is really helpful. I think, well, I hear you, I think 3 or 4 times before, but now I am curious about the, yes, exactly, because
Again the same.
yeah, but it's great because now I'm curious because I am in the process of analysis, the narrative in my case as well. And I'm curious about, yeah, you presented the story, so you are showing us the testimonies, so the powerful stories, the powerful discourses from these parents and about quality education. And my question is about how the process of analysis, because to link the policy level, because if I miss, I'm sorry, but I heard that you are doing a policy analysis, and how methodologically, or how are you get the link between the policy and the discourses, these narratives from the participants, because to make sense, well, I saw that you have identified different, obviously, thematic themes, but how was the process for to get the data, or to make sense with the policy level? So that's I'm not sure if I was clear.
Yeah, I think the connection between both is in my approach, and in the way these both are connected is, my connection is, I'm connecting these 2 levels theoretically. And through concept as governmentality, that allows me to have the same lens to see different kind of technologies of government, and how these policies could be, but also the self regulatory practices. And so the connections are, I have a theoretical framework that makes the connection that between the different methods that I choose to explore the giving a good education as a test. I can describe the process of selecting probably the policies and the process in which I also am trying to interrogate the narratives in some ways. But I don't know if you are interested in I didn't know what is your
Yes, I'm interested.
What are you interested more, like in the policy part, or in the
Yeah, so yeah, the policy, how did you select these specific topics from the policy level, to connect with the data, with the stories from the participants? No?
Well, I was looking to the different policies that are being published and being approved in the last 20 years in Chile, and I had to select some of them because it was an amount of data like very long, so I had to make it feasible. So I select 2 of them that are very that had a huge impact in the experience of people, in the experience of families relating with the educational system. The inclusion law that really changed the way in which the parents relate with the educational system, because now they cannot go directly to the school to apply for the school. They cannot, and they have to use this new admission system platform, and they are very resistant to this policy. It's been something that was not very well received in general. And there is other research about how the resistance is, I think, increasing in some moment. The people don't feel comfortable with this change of So I choose that one in particular. And of course, there is one big policy that was enacted in 2011, which is the one that created the quality frame of evaluation in Chile. So, so it's the one that defined what is going to be the functions of this new office, how the schools are going to be assessed, how it's going to be published, everything. And I'm trying to understand what are the practices that they are trying to shape. And in general, they are practices of responsibility. That is the main logic of these policies, that responsibility of all the actors, the schools, the parents, the students, like everyone is responsible for this. And there is a huge and related with parents, and there is a huge responsibilization discourse in the policy and in this document, and not just about the school choice, which is more obvious. There are also in the policy document some reference, for example, to the responsibility of the parent to take care of their children's friendships, and that kind of things are also present in some policy document that I found, like in the document that are made to disseminate some ideas about these policies. Yeah, so that is why I choose these two particular policies.
Thank you. Yeah, that's very clear.
Thanks, Sylvia. Yeah, we have a question from Pablo again. I think perhaps from Pablo now, and then also Cassian is back. So
yeah,
hi, Pablo.
Yeah, Gonzalo, you discussed about the highly segregated educational system in Chile.
yeah.
Do you see any differences between how people tell these stories and how they articulate these narratives between public and private subsidized schools?
No, not really.
Okay.
When there are experiences that are different, and they are different, and they describe like the public narrative, if you want, like this stigmatization of the public schools, even when they are their children are in a public school, and then they can make some nuances. And so they give an account of the public school are bad in some ways, but in my experience, I have some nuances to do, and that is why the experience is. I have it. I think I had it, and maybe I didn't put it in the end. The experience is very important, and we still need to work in that the people can have a good experience in the school, because that can change some perceptions. There, I have some accounts that they really start with this, well, the public schools are very bad and blah, blah, blah. And then they say, well, actually, I found quality here in my school, in my public schools, because they are very concerned about my children. They really support them. They are very like attentive to their needs. And so there are nuances, but this public idea is still very present, like, and very difficult to challenge. It's like, they're even contradictory sometimes, but it's like a double thing about it. Nine of the families were actually in state schools. Of the 29 were in state schools.
Thank you. Cassian, do you want to try? Hi.
Hello.
Hi.
Is that working now? Hi. Sorry, I've got a really bad connection here. So I wanted to clarify a little bit of what you're saying, but it was really interesting, Gonzalo. There seems to be quite a lot of narratives, competing narratives in what you were saying. So I wanted to clarify that. So your part of your analysis is that there is this neoliberal in the
Hi.
Cassian, I think you've frozen. I
This
wonder.
sort of quality agenda and equality narrative. Sorry, you've frozen, so I'm not sure if
Yeah.
How much did you get it?
It was fun.
you can hear me.
We can hear. Do you want to just,
I
if
don't
you
know
could
if
just, could you just repeat the last bit of the question, maybe?
sorry. So the question is, how, I wasn't sure how much the families are buying into this neoliberal narrative, or how much they are resisting it, because they see, they seem to see through the quality facade, that sort of agenda, but at the same time they seem to be taking saying the responsibility starts. So
You're breaking up a bit, Cassian, but I think Gonzalo, you can probably get that. You can get the idea.
Some part of I'm not sure if I can tell like very straightforward if they were resisting or not the neoliberals. They could have some nuances with respect the classical relationship between neoliberalism and, for example, quality as measurement and learning. They have probably other and more complex ideas of quality regarding that, but I'm not sure if they are resisting, for example, very explicitly the individualization of the relationship with the educational system. So they could resist some contents that are in general related with these neoliberal policies, but not always explicitly the individualization of this relationship. There were some families that explicitly do it, and I didn't mention it, but they were two of them that were very explicit about, we want to resist with all the words this neoliberal agenda. We have our children in public schools, and they were like very activist about it, and there were, but in general terms, there are some. They had learned to navigate in this after 40 years of these policies, and to navigate in this policy framework of choice and so I'm not, if I understood what I understood, I'm not very sure if I can answer like very straightforward, like, yeah, they were resisting or not. I think there are some parts that they could resist and some other not. So, yeah.
I just think this is really interesting in the way that you have used the narratives, because you're not, it is really, it's different from if you've done something thematic, just thematic, really, because it seems to me that, some of the narratives may be resisting. They're not necessarily driven by the agency of, somebody who says, I am a resistor, but they're very explanatory narratives, really. And because they are just narratives, you didn't say to people, what are your political opinions about education or something. So in the end, you get narratives at different levels, all in the same piece. So which is very good for any account of governmentality, I think. You have that kind of causal account articulated at lots of different levels, which is really, really interesting. And you gave us a very nice example. This is just what I wanted to ask you about specifically, of a parent who said, when I think my daughter came home, she was smiling and everything. So she, in a way that was that schooling there seemed to be tied into good parenting. Like you could recognize when your child was happy.
Yeah.
So she was using that kind of responsible parenting kind of account against the idea that responsible parenting involves, neoliberal quality and analyses. But I don't know if that was somebody who was also very deliberately, one of those two families, very deliberately taking a kind of resistant approach or not.
I think there is like, and with that kind of element, and there is a resistance of, and very explicit about the the reduction of quality as something that can be measured, and that is the only important thing. But if you see, like, I have these maps of things. If you see like the entire map, that resistance to that particular point, the measurement as the hegemonic, you cannot recognize the same level of resistance to other elements. And for example, the individualization and the private and the importance of the private responsibility of the family, for example. When they move to talk about parenting, is more similar to what is being described as a neoliberal parenting. So it's not like a unity of, or there is not like, there is not resistance, you know, in all the different topics. Yeah.
But you quite often hear in the British context too, people say, and this is kind of a little bit of a resistance, you know, as long as the child is happy, you know, this is, which harks back to, you know, 60s and 70s models of education in the UK, when that was a kind of criterion. And in that case you quoted, the person was saying specifically that the most emotionally supportive person in the school was, I think, a cleaner or something like this.
Yeah.
Not a teacher, you know.
No, not the teacher. No, not the teacher. Yeah. And
really
yeah, and that is a common argument. There is another participant, and she was very direct and very almost rude to describe the schools and the educational system, and she didn't care about, like, she said this is terrible, all the education is terrible, the teachers are terrible, like, but in the end, and she hated the school. But she was a grandmother in charge of the education. So it was a much more complex relationship, because she didn't choose the school, but she was in charge of the education. She lived with their granddaughter, and she paid for the school. So, and she hated the school. But in the end, she had the same reflection. And after a long account of how bad the school was, it was like, as long as she's happy, we are okay.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
No, it's really, really interesting. And I mean, we live with quality all the time, measures of quality, and it's very nice to hear you take this apart in this very situated way. It's been really interesting. Yeah, thank you. Is there anybody else who wants to come in just before we finish up? Hey, I think that maybe it. Gonzalo, thank you. That's been really lovely to hear you talk about this work, and look forward to reading it at some point. Maybe some of it is already out to read. Are we? Do you want to?
No. I'm writing some things. So
okay, great.
It's been slow, but yes, no, thank you very much for the opportunity, for the questions, the comments, and sorry for my connection at the beginning, but it seems that it works in the end. So
yeah, no, thank you. It was fine. Thanks so much. Yeah, thanks everybody. Gonzalo, do you want to make available slides, or are you not at that point yet?
Yeah.
Okay. Especially for people who were not able to come in the end, might be nice. Thank you.
Perfect.
Thanks so much. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you
very much.
Hi, Jennifer.
Hi. I missed most of it, so I'm looking forward to reading the finished piece.
Well, you have a recording. We have a recording also, so that's helpful.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Great. Good night, everybody. Thank you. See you soon.
Bye.
Bye.